Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans podcast. Today, on episode 21 of season 2, we're going to be diving into the planned city capital of Brasilia, Brazil. My name's Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host, Coleman. Aaron, unfortunately, has gone missing, so if you heard anything, please let us know, and we have reason to believe the Pinkertons may have got him again, so to be determined where Aaron is.
I despise that running gag with all my heart, so you know it's going to continue. You may find him in some of our videos in the coming weeks. You may not. The world may never know. Well, you will in 2 weeks.
But we're just running without him tonight, but I like the jokes. The mystery is there.
So anyway, today's topic is Brazil. Now, this is the first time on our main podcast that we have covered a city as our primary topic. Which is a very exciting thing for all of us. There was originally going to be a whole segment called Cities and Civilizations, where we would talk about city planning and architecture, but that has been cut for the very limited time resources we have in making all of these things. Maybe, if this goes well, if people like it, we'll start bringing that to you in our shorter form content. So do be sure to, let us know what you think of this particular episode. That said, today's episode is on Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil. With that, we're going to need to ground ourselves with where exactly in Brazil Brasilia is.
Wait, you mean Rio de Janeiro isn't Brazil's capital?
Nope. The existence of Brasilia is a purposeful rejection of a country's largest or most prosperous city being its capital.
Wow.
It's an intentional rejection of that principle.
Well, they also reject other aspects, too, that we'll get to in just a moment.
Yeah. Now, Brasilia is located in a special federal district of the Goiás state, and it sits on the central plateau of Brazil at an elevation of 3,500 feet, wherein it lies at the headwaters of three major rivers, the Tocantins, the Paraná, and the San Francisco. So possible connection to California there, we don't really know.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And as we began to touch on earlier, there were, in addition to just like there are three rivers, there were three reasons why this particular location was chosen. The first of which is Brazil has almost no inland cities. Almost every major population center they possess is on their coastline. Ooh. And so when they were looking to build a central administrative center, they wanted a place that would have protection against naval attacks and naval raids, which none of their cities really offered at the time.
Also, if you look at a map of Brazil and the location of its cities, like you said, most of them are coastal. There's not many in the interior, and most of them are actually concentrated in the north, so northern coastal cities. So a lot of the southern and even western portions of the country were left completely just ignored almost. So moving it inland also had benefits with that.
Yeah. And the reason why, if you're wondering why all those cities are on the coast, there's two key reasons for that. The first of which being Brazil is a massive, unforgiving jungle for the most part. And the second reason is Portuguese colonial economic policy stated that all you really needed to extract wealth from a territory was a port and a warehouse. So that is what they built their entire empire around. And that empire just happened to comprise the entirety of Brazil. So there was no real need to build major infrastructure inland from the Portuguese perspective, and Brazil just sort of inherits what they leave behind.
But Brazil, like many kids, don't necessarily agree with their parents' ideology and their formats. They want to try something different, something new. They want to breach into the modern world.
Yeah, it's not a phase, Dad. We're gonna burn the forest inland for McDonald's.
I wish you were lying, but that's true. If you want to look it up, there's a lot of deforestation of the Amazon for palm oil, and like it's awful. It's one of the biggest reasons behind deforestation, and McDonald's likes to use palm oil in their products.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the second of the three reasons, as we loop back to our thing, of the three reasons for putting the capital where they did, is that there's three rivers here, which provide plenty of water for the capital. Um, we're going to touch on this later, but three rivers is actually not enough to sustain Brasilia.
Oh, what?
They they underestimated the need for natural urban growth when they built the city.
Well, wasn't that one of the biggest issues for a while? Was it there wasn't much urban growth? They had to force a lot of it.
Yeah, yes, that's the initial thing. So they really didn't plan for a problem, then they created it.
Like any good human
Like
project.
any administrative center, right?
Yes.
Any good bit of government work will create a problem you didn't ask for.
Yeah, we'll burn that bridge debt later when we get to it.
Yeah. And finally, the third reason, which we touched on at the start of this lovely little show, is the area was pretty well removed from the political and economic issues of the rest of the country. It gave the federal government was essentially a neutral ground from which to arbitrate and administer the rest of the country. If you operate out of a city, most of the other districts, cities, states, provinces are going to look at that and say, well, you're always going to make policies that favor you and that city and leave the rest of us to, seconds and scraps. So having a specialized city away from all of that mitigates the validity of accusations of that nature.
Not to mention I'm skipping ahead a
Oh
couple of
yeah,
lines here, but
yeah,
one of the things that they did a lot was they mimicked other nations. When you're looking for something that works and something that is beneficial, you start looking abroad. You start looking at other countries that have done similar things. And like Brazil, two other former colonial nations also decided to set up new administrative centers for their country. And this was even beforehand. So, like, the United States in Washington, D.C. was a pre planned administrative center, which is why it in theory doesn't have statehood and was on land that was ceded from both Maryland and Virginia.
yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
the idea of a pre-planned administrative city for the government is not a new one, and I find it interesting because Brasilia isn't even the most recent example of it.
Yeah, no, there is, I believe, was it Nigeria is in the process of doing that,
There's two other major ones. Can you tell me?
and I believe also Indonesia.
Indonesia is one of them, where they're moving their capital from Jakarta to the main island or to the big island,
Yeah,
and the other one is actually Egypt, who is relocating their capital city, basically in between the Sinai Peninsula and Cairo. That huge plot of land in the desert. They're like, yeah, we're gonna build a new city right here.
yeah. I'm just having Akhenaten flashbacks. Wonderful Egyptian pharaoh tried to build his own city, did not work.
Well, this one I think they're a
Um,
little further along in the process.
yeah, but anyway, yes. There is a precedent for planned national capitals prior to the establishment of Brasilia, with Washington, D.C. in the United States, and also Canberra in Australia being planned national capitals. However, Brasilia does have the distinction of being the first national capital planned along what would be modern guidelines and sensibilities of urban design and urban layout and how one should go about building a city. So it's the first modern one that we get, which is a lovely distinction for them to have. Um, Additionally, as of 1987, the city itself was designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, um, just 27 years after it became the capital of Brazil. And that is officially due to two key factors. The first of which is its unique city plan and architecture. They hired not one but three visionary architects, three would effectively be grand masters of city design.
And this
to build
city is considered a example of a masterpiece of this style of architecture, which is part of the reason. So, some historical humans lore here. The reason why we chose this episode was because of its importance, one, but because there's a certain debate behind the scenes to this style of architecture.
The question we have posed to each other and now to you, the audience, is it art? Is it pretty? Do you like this? For some of us, that is true. For others, the answer is very different. And the R&D department on this has made very much certain that the name of the art style for this city does not appear once in the notes.
It is considered modernist architecture, and it is considered a grandmaster prime example of the style, which Colum personally hates, but I respect it as an art form, and I think anything is better than brutalism.
It's neo-brutalist, but we'll get into that later. We'll get into that later because we need to finish up with our UNESCO part here. The second reason is a little bit more ethically iffy, as we'll talk about near the end of this show, and that is Brasilia has had an unprecedented impact on the development of the interior of Brazil. And because of that unique foundational change to the landscape, i.e. literally building a massive purpose-built government city, it's considered a significant and unique enough cultural artifact to warrant inclusion on UNESCO. There are so many morally gray things we're going to get into with that phrase.
Which, if you want to know more about the Brasilia UNESCO World Heritage, be sure to stay tuned and to subscribe, because later this week on Thursday we are actually going to have an episode drop about Brasilia where you'll get to see a lot more. You'll get to see images and pictures for those who are more visual, but you'll get to see the more nitty-gritty opinionated side.
Yes, we have an explains coming, I take it.
No, that's going to be our heritage.
Oh yes, that's right.
You
Heritage
forgot.
does drop on Thursdays. No, I forgot that was on the Thursday slot, and you confused me. I was like, Heritage doesn't drop on Thursday.
Oh, but it does.
Yeah. Anyway, where were we? Yes. So construction of Brasilia first began in 1956 with a man named Lucio Costa as the principal urban planner and Oscar Niemeyer as the principal architect. It was deemed fully operational and became the capital of Brazil only 4 years later in 1960.
That surprisingly isn't that bad of a turnaround time.
Oh no, it's amazing. They had the entire city layout, all the roads, planned out and paved within a single year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
I really miss the efficiency of the mid-50s. I mean, I know that's when health and safety violations were the most rampant, but, they got things done.
Yeah. And with that, the history of Brasilia begins long before 1960 or 1956. In fact, it begins well over a century earlier, with nothing more than a man and his dream. It is said that the city was dreamt of by Dom Bosco, a 19th century Catholic saint, who first dreamt of a city between the 15th and 20th parallels in Brazil, which is just so happens to be where Brasilia is located.
Ooh.
Yes, and because of this dream or prophetic vision from God, whichever you choose, depending on whether or not you are a believer, there is a shrine dedicated to Dom Bosco that can be found on exactly the 15th parallel near Brasilia. So there's a shrine to him that they built in honor of his proclamation, which, the man attained sainthood, so you can't, you can't really say he's wrong.
I mean, he's at
At
least
least,
got three things going for him.
yeah, yeah. At least not in as heavily of a Catholic country as Brazil. You gotta love it. However, the road doesn't really take a straight path from dreams to reality. So Brazil becomes an independent nation from the Portuguese Empire in 1822. And this is where a man named José Bonifacio de Andrade e Silva comes into play. Now, a Silva is a key statesman in the establishment of an independent Brazilian empire. He is responsible for Emperor Pedro actually attaining his independence as an emperor and not having the whole thing go kaput. So he's kind of got a blank check as of 1822. And with this blank check, he makes the unilateral decision that Brazil must have a purpose-built capital named Brasilia in honor of the nation. This does not change. It does not happen, but it does not change.
I like how that has been, what, 130 years in the making? At least they held true to it. At least they kept it.
It took them 133 years to get from saying we are going to do this to actually doing it. But if you think that's the last time they proclaim the capital Brasilia, you would be wrong. Because keep in mind, his declaration, Silva's declaration here, is for the Brazilian Empire. That empire is pretty short-lived. It lasts less than a century. Because in 1889, the first Brazilian Republic is founded, and the Brazilian Empire comes to an end. And with a formal constitution adopted in 1891, the Republic of Brazil mandates that it must have a specially made capital city. Keeping, of course, with, the unspoken tradition that it shall be called Brasilia because Silva is, of course, still revered. So now you think things would start happening. But they don't. The Brazilian government proceeds to make zero efforts to manifest their constitutionally mandated city. In theory, you could argue that the Brazilian government from 1891 to 1955 is invalid because it is not ruling out of Brasilia. In theory, you would get shot down by basically every Brazilian who ever lived, but you can make that argument. Which is, of course, always very fun. And they put it on paper, and they let it sit until 1955. This is when a man named, and Justin, can you do the pronunciation for this man? Because his name is a wonderful series of letters.
Oh, jeez. Juscelino Kubitschek de Oliveira.
Yes, that man. That man is a man who becomes responsible for all of this becoming reality. He makes a campaign speech promising that if he is elected, he will build Brasilia. Well, he wins the 1955 election. And he creates the federal district and the city of Brasilia, which is then approved by Brazil's Congress in September of 1956. So they've got land for the city. They've got a special federal district for the city. They still have no idea what to put there. Cue the 1956 national competition to determine the design of Brasilia. Now, interestingly enough about this competition is, while it was a national competition, meaning that only, Brazilians were participating, the judges were not Brazilian, or at least not only Brazilian, as an international jury voted on what would become the final design, that would win this contest. And it's sort of the same way that they would decide where World's Fairs would be held, or who hosts the Olympics. Big mistakes like Rio, anyone?
Oh, that was what, 2016, so.
That was 2016. The swimming pools had sewage in them.
Yeah, but that still doesn't excuse Lochtey's behavior.
Anyway, we're not gonna go down that war path on Brazil here. We've placed our barb, and we'll move on. And the winner was the pilot plan by Lucio Costa. Now, Costa, at this point in his life, he's established himself as a major architect, and he's really seen as sort of a national prize by the Brazilian people for his work with the education ministry. Yeah, he was designing schools prior to this contest, and we're gonna enter into sort of the three men that make Brazil happen. The first of which is the man behind the scenes, the head honcho that oversees the entire project, a man known simply as Le Corbusier.
Yes.
Yes, Le Corbusier, born Charles Edouard Jeanneret, was the head of the project, and he was a Swiss-French architect who had experience working both with the Brazilian government and with Costa. He had previously worked with both Costa and the third guy in this project, Niemeyer, and had been responsible. He was basically the man who promoted them to the national stage as people worthy of listening to in terms of architecture and city design.
Not to mention, Le Corbusier was a world-renowned architect at this time, a grandmaster of his craft. He was one of the most well-respected architects in the world. So to have a man of that fortitude attached to this project instantly gave it a huge amount of credibility and a huge amount of prestige, almost, because this was Brazil coming onto the world stage, showing themselves as a new power. This was a projection of power in most.
Yeah, and it was really a major vote of full confidence for Costa's plan and his ability to get it done, as prior to this project, Corbusier was already promoting Costa as a man to be reckoned with. So the politics of this really do start to weave themselves together. We'll see more of that when we get to Niemeyer, the third man. But first, we got to talk about Costa. Now, Costa's job is to be the principal urban planner. This means that he conceptualized the city and designed its layout. So he's responsible for the road work, the layout of the buildings, the districting. What goes where is decided by him. If he says that this block is all apartments, then you better build apartments here. If he said the road turns this way, the road turns this way. He is the man laying out sort of the skeleton on which the architecture will be draped. And he is so involved with the design of his new city that he determined everything down to the color of the cabbies' uniforms.
That's an impressive level of micromanagement levels.
This man wrote a full paragraph on the shape, style, and color of every bus driver's hat.
I hope this man spent hours and days of his time meeting with fashion designers who are going through a range of designs, and he's just pretending to be a fashion executive, but for these uniforms.
Yeah, listen. I am about 90% certain that the perfectionist levels displayed by this man are indicative of OCD as a career benefit. The level of meticulous perfection he goes after with his city is actually kind of terrifying. Like, I'm pretty sure the man did not sleep, eat, or do anything more intimate for 4 whole years.
I mean, I respect it on a level of this is your pride project, this is your baby. The government has come to you to design this and to do all these aspects, so you are going to put all of your effort into it. But he, like, took that to the 10th degree.
Yeah. Oh, and he likes going all in on things because he has all the roads for the city laid out and completely paved within a single year. Uh, and he very much likes to compartmentalize Brasilia. He sees that as the key to being a modern city and a city of the future. So he creates two key roads along the principle of two sharp divides, and that is the divide between the civitas and the urbs. Now, just in general terms, the civitas is the administrative part of the city. It is the government buildings. It is the things that that are the reason that we're out here building Brasilia in the first place. It's all the fancy official municipal buildings that are responsible for administering laws and housing the Congress and doing all the important run the city, run the nation stuff. The urbs is the everyday environment of the city. This is where people live. This is where they shop. This is everything that is required for the basics of human beings living in a confined space,
AKA a city or urban environment.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, the
Also, I
urbs.
like how it's called herbs, like urban. They're trying to be hip. They're trying to be cool. Hey,
Yeah,
kids, you
no,
want to go to the herbs?
yeah. Yes, yes. Revert to the Latin, Justin. Come with me. Revert to the Latin.
No. No.
Urbs urbis. City. Yeah, it's like that's right.
Suburbs.
Now we're gonna do Latin conjugations because Justin loves linguistics just so much. Everybody. I'm kidding. I'd surprise you with that later.
Some people just want to watch the world learn.
Yeah. Ignis Igni. The fire. Yes, and so with this, the idea of creating this divide, he focuses on creating two key routes. The first of which is this curving highway axis, which curves from the north down to the southwest. And the purpose of this sort of arcing bow is to connect all of Brasilia's residential neighborhoods to the city center, to the civitas, to all the administrative districts. And just sort of curves out to create space for them and let them sort of shoot out more or less radially for a large part. He's basically building a giant protractor for some of the city. The second part is the straight monumental axis, which runs northwest to southeast. Here is where all the federal and civic buildings are, which are themselves subdivided. All the federal and municipal buildings are located at the northwestern end, whereas all the executive, judicial, and legislative buildings are at the southeastern end. So basically, as you drive north to south on this axis, you go through districts of increasing governmental importance until at the very end you have the Senate, the Congress, the court, and it was the executive palace.
The thing that I love about this city, though, and one of the truest, most funniest bits of urban planning and design city planning, is the fact that the city was planned in an aesthetic format, but it wasn't planned in a functional format. So when it comes to actually traversing between the areas or to drive across the city, takes a lot longer, and congestion in the city has been a huge concern.
The bus depot for this city has a more complicated loadout than the entirety of O'Hare Airport.
Yeah.
I've seen the pictures.
Oh, it's nightmare fuel.
I don't want to go to the bus station. Uh, yes. So the southeastern end features what is known as the Square of Free Powers. This square is the conceptual heart of the city. This is where the heads of the legislative, judicial, and executive branches are all housed. This is where their work is done. This is the first part of the city that gets planned. This is the purpose of the city. And we will get into what exactly is there and how it looks later. However, as you were talking about the aesthetic design, there have been a number of interesting descriptors given to what the hell is going on with this city on the layout, which I do love the art for. But it has been described as a bird, a plane, a bow and arrow.
No, it's a bird. It's a plane. It's the administrative center of Brazil.
It's a frog. No frog, just little old me, underdog.
Oh no.
Copyright strike, here we come.
It
Fight me, 40-year-old cartoons.
The thing is, like, all of these are both hilarious and caricatures, but they're also kind of accurate because the design is definitely out there. It's a very unique style. Like, one of the main buildings is a bunch of white spires combined together.
Yeah, that's a very fun one. But Justin, in all of this, in all these things that people have said to try and describe what it is they're looking at, none have been more poetic and more adamant than Mr. Costa himself. As in his own proposal for the city, was effectively the plan that he submitted to the contest that won him the right to build this. He has a full paragraph describing the elegance and artistry of his road design, which concludes with the following phrase to describe the layout of the city. The symbol of power, 2 axes at right angles, the very sign of the cross. Which is a great way to win things over in mid-20th century Brazil. My design is holy, vote for me.
I mean, also, to be fair, it already has the connotation with the saint, so, like, the religious iconography really doesn't surprise me, and yeah, a lot of people tend to liken themselves to religious figures, especially when they're vying for power.
Yeah.
It's crazy how those two seem to go side by side.
Yeah. In this case, the power was one man's right to horribly misdesign an entire city.
It's my right, and I'll do it my way.
Yeah. That's going to bring us to our third man involved, Oscar Niemeyer, who is the principal architect on the project and is also a former student of Costa. In fact, he's one of Costa's oldest students, one of the first men that Costa teaches. And like his mentor, the man's got the talent for it. Oh. And as principal architect, Costa is running around mandating bus driver uniforms, laying out roads, and redistricting the entire city. All the buildings that have to go there, Niemeyer has to design and build them. That's his job, is to design and construct all the buildings in Brasilia.
While his mentor is like obsessing over ties and hat designs.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you take care of like the grunt work. You just design the buildings. I'll take care of all the important stuff.
Yeah. I'm half convinced Costa was colorblind, given how much he likes gray on all of the things.
It's very modern, Colum. It's very modern.
I'm waiting for you to start playing Dixie as you say that. Everything is gray.
I also just seem to think of like HGTV, where you see all these like new kitchens and designs, and it's like, oh, it looks so modern, but it looks like it's just a black and white because it's all just different shades of gray.
Yeah. 50 to be precise.
Oh, okay. Anyways, we're going to
And
talk
yeah,
about the architecture of the
yeah,
city.
yeah. Get you to speak for 5 minutes now.
Uh,
So for those of you that want to follow along with us, when we post this to YouTube, we're going to make sure to post the link to the UNESCO World Heritage listing so that you can look at some of the architecture yourself and see a little bit more of that. We will also, of course, be covering Brasilia on our heritage episodes if you want to just go over there after this video and watch that. But for the most part, it's a very fun site to go look at and see some of the things that we're going to try to describe to you.
yeah, because our descriptions are going to be poor at best, and to see them is a different thing.
Yeah, I did my best to translate the architectural jargon back into common English for the sake of visuals. However, it will not be a one-to-one by
Close
any
enough.
measure of the imagination. Yep. So to start us off with, Justin, we have the aforementioned Square of Three Powers. It is the focal point of the Congressional Palace, which is where the Congress of Brazil is housed. And it is comprised of 5 key parts. The first 2 of which is a twin administrative towers. These towers are flanked by the next 2 features that we're going to talk about, but effectively, it's a pair of narrow concrete rectangles rising into the sky. There's not a lot of flourish on this. It's meant to be imposing against the skyline and sort of use that height to enact a sense of awe and power. The second feature, which would be on a general approach from most of the pictures I've seen, would be to the left of this of these towers, is a white concrete dome. This serves as the meeting place of the Senate. Yes, this is where Palpatine lives.
Oh, no, no.
He is the Senate.
There's your
He is
Star
the
Wars
Senate. He liveth
reference.
there. Yeah. On the what would be the right-hand side, completing the flank, is a massive white concrete bowl in equal size to the concrete dome. What this effectively looks like is that someone lost their contacts. And it is this bowl that bamboozles me to a point that I have to hate the city. It makes 0 sense. This bowl sits atop, or perhaps even is, the Chamber of Deputies. I'm not sure. Brazilian government, tell me, how does it feel to govern out of a bowl of ramen?
Look, it's interesting, okay, because you have the parallel between the 2 towers, but then you have the contrasting because you have the dome, then you have the bowl, you have the before
Yeah.
and the after.
Yeah, I get it's trying to be like 2 halves of the spear, upper house, lower house kind of deal, combined together to form, the one true thing. But it does not work for me.
You're just a hater.
It does not work. And with that, we come to the 5th part, which is the sort of thing that ties it all together. The not really a real flourish, but just sort of the foundation for all of this, which is there's a flat roofed building that is underlies the entire compound. It connects all the features to one another. It also has a number of hidden annexes and wings to sort of allow all the offices and minor officials and just general things you need in a building to run a building to exist without really imposing on the view of the architecture or getting in the way of the actual governing chambers. Sort of a nice way to have everything in one location without building things on top of each other, because everything is just under the main architecture.
I can respect that, having everything in the same area, in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah, it does all come together. It makes for a unique site. It is a unique skyline. Um, uh, especially for people who are so concerned with whether or not they could, they forgot to think if they should.
It was cutting edge for the era, and because it hasn't aged the best, you're just a hater, okay? It houses a
Um,
lot of important places too, and not to mention, beyond the chambers, it also houses the Planalto Palace and the Palace of the Supreme Court, which the Planalto Palace is home of the presidential offices and has that wonderful, glorious glass facade. So not
yes,
quite the lame concrete that you seem
yeah,
to.
yeah, no, no. This one is actually kind of interesting because if you look at it from the outside, you would assume that the building is made almost entirely of glass. It's not. It's glass on top of the concrete designed to reflect back and actually create an aesthetic instead of just putting a concrete slab in front of you.
Look, they tried something different, and it works.
Mm-hmm. Uh, and the Palace of the Supreme Court, of course, houses the Supreme Court of Brazil. There wasn't a lot of major architectural details on it in the lookup, but I'm sure it is probably it's probably not as much of a site as the buildings surrounding it. There are a number of very interestingly laid out and famous buildings that aren't on their own like individually hyper impressive, which is okay because you're building an entire city in 4 years. You have to actually get things done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, with that, there's the next big thing, which is the Metropolitan Cathedral.
Well, actually, real quick before you get
Yes.
that to that
Oh, yes,
point,
please do.
I think one of the things that we should also highlight is these buildings and their designs. I don't know if you noticed, but there's recurring themes with the materials. Glass and concrete, two materials that are pretty readily available, easily constructible, and things that can be assembled on site, which also leans its credibility and credence to having been built in 4 years because these methods of construction are arguably a lot quicker and show the modernization of the building procedure as well.
Yeah, and if we're going to go on that point, the three materials of modern construction, the three that are associated with it most strongly, is steel, glass, and concrete. Uh, fun fact: the reason why the Eiffel Tower is made out of steel was because it was attempting to be modernist in its time. Uh, so it is one of those. It's one of those things where those are considered the building materials of the present and future, even though concrete goes back like 2,200 years.
I mean, yeah, concrete does, but in terms of building architecture this way and
Yeah.
stylistically, this was a huge break, and arguably it's better than a lot of the other like minimalist designs that came afterwards, where it was just steel and glass.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. I'll let it slide for like at least you got to have fun with it in modernism. I'll let it go at that. I don't mind the glass boxes. Not nearly as much as I mind that bowl.
Okay, but now you can go to the
Yeah.
cathedral. Sorry,
Yeah.
I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing that they highlighted a
Yeah.
lot in
Yeah.
architecture.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so with the Metropolitan Cathedral, where the Square of Three Powers is the heart of Brasilia, where it is the reason why this city exists, where it is like the first thing that was designed, the first thing that would be built, the thing that makes it all beat. The cathedral, which is located exactly halfway down the monumental axis, is considered Niemeyer's finest achievement. It is considered the pinnacle of what he did here at Brasilia, as well as everything he did later on in his career. This is considered the best this man has ever produced. Um, and it's one of the things in the city that I do, in fact, find beautiful.
That's honestly a really incredible thing for something to be considered the pinnacle of your career and like a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And this structure is gorgeous. Like it's one of the most easily identifiable structures of Brasilia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's definitely. So it is. The basic structure is a parabolic structure, which is effectively creating an hourglass kind of shape. The top of the hourglass is a little bit stinted compared to the much broader bottom. And this hourglass is itself comprised of 16 curving white supports that join together in a circle 115 feet above the ground. All the walls between between each of these 16 supports are made of panels of tinted translucent glass. So it has this kind of blue shimmer as you look at it. The view from inside is absolutely breathtaking. The view from outside does its own bit to stun you, but from inside is where it really comes to life.
See, I like the next bit the best, though, where there are no conventional doorways. You actually have to enter through subterranean passageways.
Yeah, it's like there are no doors because this is a perfectly symmetrical building. A door would offset that, so all ingress and egress is conducted through underground tunnels.
It's like the perfect evil villain entrance. I love it.
It's like how the Bears get onto the football stadium every week, or if since we're in a church here, how you would enter into the underworld in Greek and Mayan religions.
Yeah, that's
A lot of old religions. You enter into the holy space by going underground. You enter into the holy space by going underground here. You gotta love it. It keeps with tradition. The apex of this structure is, of course, crowned with a cross. It is a Catholic cathedral. As you know, so as is fitting, it is of course crowned with that iconography. To the surprise of no one. But yes, it's a very very fun structure. It's one of the few monuments I really do get behind as like, okay, yeah, this is worth it in this city. Unlike that bowl. Unlike that god-forsaken bowl.
Look, it was edgy. It was something different. It was an attempt.
Show me the edges. It's a freaking half spear.
Now I have a desire to create the world's largest ramen inside of it.
Welcome to my cursed life, everybody. I have infected another victim. With that, we're going to get to what, as archaeologists, is of course considered the most important part of the city, and probably the most important part of the city to anyone who actually lives in one: the residential areas.
AKA the areas way the hell away from the center.
Yep, the areas on the sort of the bow part of this lovely bow and arrow. So when they were building residences for the city, they built both low-cost and luxury housing in the central city. And within this, residential zones were arranged into what are known as super quadras, which are effectively super blocks. These consist of groupings of apartment buildings that are given their own preset mini city. With a set number of schools, shops, parks, etc. What effectively it is they took, probably about 1,000, 2,000, acres or more, built a bunch of high rises, and then built like everything you would need to sustain those high rises within that block, and then repeated over and over again.
And that's something that's very prevalent in even modern architecture currently, is this idea of these micro cities within the overall city. And this is a trend that really started taking roots around this time, and it's something, like I said, that we still do today, but it's, like you said, it's a self-contained ecosystem within this environment where you don't need anything outside of your block where you live, because there should be enough schools, there should be enough shops, there should be enough jobs and things that you would never have to venture too far out for. And that's what makes urban life a lot easier. And in terms of Brasilia specifically, because they were starting from scratch, they were able to pre-plan out everything, which some would almost argue takes away the soul of the city, I think. I think a lot of that natural sprawl is what gives it that charm. But like, I also understand it. I mean, I know you know people that live in the city that have everything within walking distance.
Yeah, it's the idea is and with here the idea is you're trying to manufacture something that can sustain itself. So you are forcing everything into a spot and hoping for the best. But Justin, I don't see why you would ever have to leave your district or talk to people from other districts. Just live in your district with catnip evergreen. uh,
No, but
yeah.
seriously, that's what the idea is, and that's what the whole thought process is. I mean, I know we live in Chicago, but one of the prime examples is Marina Towers. The Corncob buildings are a prime example of this ideology where everything is within, a stone's throw. It's all with self-contained.
Yeah.
If you build it, they will come.
And come they did, because the one thing that Brasilia did not anticipate was urban sprawl. The capital of the nation has spawned a number of ancillary towns and suburban satellite cities. Almost all of which have been completely unplanned, are entirely organic in nature, and basically, as you move out past the original city, the nature of what you are driving through changes so dramatically. Imagine going up and down the grid streets of New York and then finding yourself weaving through the cul-de-sacs of Paris.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I love it.
That is what
That's
happens
chaos embodied.
In about the span of less than a mile. You can just do that here.
But see, that also kind of goes against the whole ideology of the city because the city was pre-planned. Now what we have is city planning documents and guidelines that usually plan out the next 5 to 10 years of city planning projects. I'm assuming that this was very much this is where my job ends and I'm done.
Yeah, they didn't expect to need more than what they had. And one of the reasons why the satellite towns actually start springing up is actually in part because at the ends of the monumental axis, those were actually meant to go a little further up into sort of a lake and whatnot, and they were supposed to have like the luxury elite housing built there. That never got built because capitalism intervened and started buying up the rights to have shops on the edges of the monumental axis, because if you are the only person selling, food in this, 50-mile stretch of one-way highway, you will make a money.
You will make one single money.
You will make the money. And so it all got bought out by like corporations and other things, resorts, restaurant shops, all that, just bought it, just bought out all the plots of land from the government and like, yeah, no, they're going to build here. And it was, all right, whatever, one less thing for me to do. And it's like, and suddenly there's less housing in the city than all the people that are needed to be in the city right from the get-go.
Well, and then the other thing too that contrasts Brasilia from a lot of the city bay or the coastal based cities is a lot of them are locked between the coast and huge mountain ranges. This had the ability and the access to be almost unrestricted.
There is no hill to get in the way. You are on top of the hill.
Yeah, so
you are the hill. Yeah.
Kind of interesting there. Unfortunate.
Downside, there's no 500-foot cliff to put a giant statue of your god.
A true shame, truly.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a beautiful position, too. I mean, they knew what they were doing.
Especially when it gets struck by lightning numerous times throughout the year.
Are you kidding me? That's the best part.
That iconography is unreal.
Jesus as the thunder god.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. Jesus was Zeus.
Yeah. Or Thor. I mean, you just got the beard, hammer.
All of them. It's that whole, like, Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson mentality where the gods don't change. They're just the way they present themselves morphs, like from culture to culture.
Mm-hmm.
They're still the same underneath.
Yeah. So,
Anyways.
moving back to Brasilia. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about yet, but we did hint at the beginning, was Brazil's unique developments in, sort of reshaping the interior of the nation with this city. We've seen some of that with the urban sprawl. We've seen that with the original design. But there's one other very important thing. This city is at, like, the crossroads of three major rivers. It's a pretty good place for people to live. And people already were. Cue the Candango people, without whom Brasilia could not have been built, but for whom it was not constructed.
Oh, gee, so let me just clarify this real quick. You're telling me that Brazil used native indigenous labor to construct a modern city for the non-native population that has since inhabited this land. And in doing so, they probably also displaced many of the indigenous people as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. So I do not know in the research, it did not come up where the Candango people currently reside. Suffice to say, it is not Brasilia.
Crazy how that always
Yeah.
just seems to work out that way every time.
Yeah, without the use of the labor of the Candango people, Brasilia would not have been built in 4 years. It might not have ever gotten finished, with how hard it was to get out there, especially during the initial phases of construction.
Kind of a weird, interesting parallel that I find too is in America, most of the early iron workers were natives, and part of that was they had no perceived fear of heights. Turns out they just had no way. Their like cultures never manifested fear. So a lot of the early iron workers were indigenous Americans, and yeah, seeing them build this city too, it's interesting.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that they were without all compensation. During the inauguration of the city in 1960, a sculpture was unveiled at the heart of Brasilia to honor them and their sacrifice for the nation.
This is feeling very capital city vibe.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
Why are you making so... Did you just read Mockingjay recently? Like...
I made 2 jokes, baby.
Yeah, I know. Of the same vein. Like, did you just read the book?
No, but we were at 2. Listen, man. We're at 1 for Jurassic Park, 1 for Underdog, 1 for Superman, 2 for...
Hunger Games.
Whatever, the Hunger Games, 1 for Star Wars, and there's 1 more in there that I have forgotten because we've been at this for a while.
You're just trying to make all of the...
I'm running the circuit, baby.
Anyways, the ecological impact as well. So they built a statue. They said, "Thank you for your sacrifice, Lord Farquaad. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the ecological impact. So the massive population growth of Brasilia has strained the water supply in the region. The 3 rivers are not enough to sustain Brasilia as it stands now.
Wow.
And a large part of this is a large part of this issue comes from the 2,300 wells that were implemented to access water, creating a fracking effect on the ground, which is basically where you take, imagine you have all the, a little hill of earth, and then you remove, a chunk of it from the center. That hill starts to collapse in on itself.
Not to mention, the whole idea of fracking is you take high-pressured water, like air and water, and you blast it into the earth to free up locked-in resources, in this case being water. So you're literally just shooting the earth with high pressure just to cause water to come back up. So
they're basically attempting to pressurize the pumps and pull it out. Now, of these 2,300 wells, almost all of them have been implemented illegally by residents of Brasilia attempting to gain better access to water.
Hey, we're running out of water, so let's illegally pump more water. It's fine if I do it, but if 2,300 other people do it, then, oops.
Yeah. And this draining of the groundwater caused a 3.7 earthquake to hit Brasilia in, I believe, 2001.
If it's not the consequences of my own actions.
Yeah. Yes. Kansas, anyone?
Oh, no.
Earthquakes 1,000,000 miles from the nearest plate tectonic?
Yeah.
I wonder what causes that, Nebraska. I'm just going to start calling out U.S. states right and left here at this point.
Yeah, and yet you're not going for the two biggest frackers, North Dakota and Oklahoma.
Well, one of those belongs to you, Justin. One of those is for you.
I no longer claim ownership over North Dakota. I hereby cede any claim I've had to North Dakota.
Justin used to work out there, so we're giving him...
I was in Southern Dakota.
That's the same thing.
There are two Dakotas until there's one true Dakota.
Yeah. Listen. It's all the same thing, Dakotas, Carolinas, Americas, Koreas.
Okay, before you get us too canceled, I think we should probably reel this carriage back into the station and call it a day.
Yeah. So this has been Brasilia. It's a very interesting city. Got a lot of history going on for such a very short period of time.
And truly a masterpiece of its architectural style. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out our Heritage episode coming out later this week with visuals on Brasilia and the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.